As we step into the 18th episode today, I want to show my immense gratitude to God, universe, and the people who have supported me throughout, all my guests, and of course, you, the audience, because this Limitless show, this movement has gotten into territories and expanded into horizons that I never thought of when I began. On the show, you have been meeting people from such wide and varied fields and drawing immense wisdom, practical wisdom from them, helping you widen your own horizon and your perspective and your mindset. Today's episode is the most special of all because today's topic of discussion, the education of a child in a safe, creative, and non judgmental background environment, is very, very close to my heart as a mother. My guest, Aryavan McSweeney, had the privilege of being raised in a truly holistic and spiritual environment in the United States, which most of us, all our children lack in today's mainstream education. He was born and raised in an Ananda spiritual community in California and has been a disciple of the spiritual master Paramhansa Yogananda for over a decade. After meeting Yogananda's direct disciple Kriyananda, Swami Kriyananda, at the age of 22, Aryavan spent the next 3.5 years traveling with and learning from him. At Swamiji's request, Aryavan became a teacher in an Education for Life school, which uses a system of education based on Yogananda's teachings. He now lives in India, working on different projects to bring the practical universal principles of yoga into mainstream education, including the creation of an EFL-based K-8 curriculum and the founding of an EFL Institute for the broader dissemination of this approach to teachers and parents in Europe, India, and around the world. So before I bring on Aryavan, I need to show you one video which will throw immense light on this system of education, on the Living Wisdom School, on how our children should actually be raised. So let me play that for you.
I love the school because of all the nice teachers and all the fun activities. Because we're all a big family.
I can be myself.
We have great friends here. Because I like to learn a lot.
Children going into the 21st century, they're going to need more than academics. They're definitely going to need math and science, but they're also going to need to understand how to collaborate, how to create community, how to be critical thinkers, and how to be problem solvers.
Welcome! Anybody know the second one? I am positive, energetic, and enthusiastic. I am positive.
I would say our approach is very holistic. We don't compartmentalize the academics like, oh, the academics are over here, but then the social emotional are over here. It's all of a piece. It's that ability of the teachers in a school like this to use their intuition, and everything that we do in our school is about their consciousness, their happiness, their awareness.
A good student is someone who knows how to thrive in all circumstances. Academics are effortless if you give the children the tools within themselves to know how to use that education.
Relax and inhale through your nose. Feel the coolness of the breath as it comes in.
Our school is all about joy and learning, together, not apart. And the one informs the other. There's a principle of non-exclusivity. Instead of cliques, you have families. When you expect kindness, then you can be yourself. And when you have that, you have everything because you can learn.
And how about the C5 age 12?
I love working at Living Wisdom School because we have such an incredibly caring community that's been cultivated over the years. Social and emotional well-being is essential to a student having a positive learning experience. When we are in a state where we feel unsafe, the brain shuts down and it becomes almost impossible to have real lasting and deep learning.
I think the most important skill that I learned at Living Wisdom School was actually people skills. How to relate to people, how to know what motivates them, how to know what would make them happy, the ability to make people laugh and to have fun while doing things that you have to do anyway.
The more Children are having fun while they're learning, the deeper the learning goes. I think when the kids see mathematics outside of their pencil and their paper, they actually get to play with it. It just forms new connections in their brains, and it also makes math more magnetic for them because it feels like they're playing while they're working.
My favorite subject is science.
I love science.
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 Math.
Math. Math and free time.
Science. Yeah, science.
We get to do acting, dancing. We all get to choose an instrument. We do art weekly, and then there's the school play too.
Our school does plays on saints, George Washington Carver, Krishna, Joan of Arc, and I feel like that's very unique.
For me, meditation woven into the classroom and practices of yoga are incredibly important because they nurture the children not only physically, but also helping them to learn how to work with their inner experiences, their emotional states, their ability to concentrate.
All of our teachers on faculty have a spiritual practice. It's not always the same spiritual practice, but most of our teachers have meditation as part of their day.
My meditation practice heightens my intuition and my ability to relate energetically with the students and help to guide their experience and interactions throughout the day.
There's a lot of respect for the different cultures that we bring in. I bring a lot of my Jewish culture and my Jewish learning and my Jewish experience to the classroom. It's just a beautiful place. I've never taught at a school like this before.
Every week the whole school gathers in our all-school circle, and we have certified yoga teachers on staff. It's a whole community doing yoga together.
If you are like really frustrated or just sad, meditating can help you very much. And we made these mind jars. It's like a timer of meditating. And all the little sparkles represent your mind. And by the time they settle, your mind has settled.
Students learn that it's possible to choose how you're going to respond to a situation, that we're not victims of our lives, but we are proactive participants.
So these are extremely important life skills.
I learned through my education here that I have the ability inside of me to decide whether or not I will be happy in this moment, and even more than that, what I can achieve.
That's what we're helping the children do. Become masters of their own energy. If you can master your restlessness, your fears, and your moods, then, well, frankly, academics are easy.
I can honestly say that at this school, we cultivate deep thinkers, problem solvers, and kind people.
That's who we are, Living Wisdom School.
Flow through me, flow through me, flow through me.
God's power, vitality, good health and strength, flow through me, flow through me, flow through me. God's power, vitality.
Hey everyone, I hope you had fun watching the video. I'm really sorry I do not have electricity at my place, so just making do with a lamp. But nonetheless, the show must go on. So let's bring in our special guest for the day. Hey Aryavan, extremely honored to have you here.
It's a joy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I love the attitude of the show must go on. This is one of the big things I learned when I was a student at the school. The video we just watched was we did these dramatic productions, and the mantra was the show must go on. No matter what happens, we just keep going, we keep acting, we keep telling the story. And so you're exemplifying that beautifully.
Thank you so much. So, you have been a student as well as now you are the educator in such a special system of education. So what was your childhood like? I mean, first of all, how did you get into the Ananda community? How was the beginning, And then how was your childhood like? Please, let us know that.
Sure, sure. So my parents were already a part of the Ananda community when I was born, so I didn't have to do any work. I just,
Okay.
from the age of 3, I was already
Uh-huh.
there, and it's the only upbringing that I knew, and that made all the difference. So I went to this school from my very first year of school, kindergarten, KG, all the way through class 8, and yeah, I mean, growing up in an environment where everybody is trying their best to be their higher selves. I mean, that's essentially what Ananda is. It's a group of people. We follow the teachings of Yogananda, but they're completely non-sectarian. They're just, how can I master my own energy? How can I become the best version of myself? And there are practices like meditation and things to help guide that search. But at the end of the day, it's just that. How can I become better and more whole?
Right.
And so the school was the same. So I went to the school, and they, you know, it's one of those things you take for granted when you're a child. You just sort of think everyone is living this way. But when I show up to other schools later on as I was growing up and met other people, I realized, oh man, that thing I was doing was actually very special. It was not the average experience or the norm.
Yes.
So yeah, I found it, you know, the Living Wisdom School, it actually started when I was there. So we went through a number of different incarnations. I was in the first class, and then I was the first graduate. And now the school has been going for over 25 years in the heart of Silicon Valley. And it is doing, I think it's doing beautifully, actually. Just in terms of, like, you think about Silicon Valley, or I do, growing up there, it's a very high pressure, high competition environment. You know, it's like, actually, it feels a lot like India, where there's just like a lot of people trying to compete and make their way to the top. And yet somehow this school that puts all of that, not aside, but it puts it in its proper place and puts an enormous amount of focus on being a kind person, being a happy person, how to work harmoniously with others at the fore, and somehow has been incredibly successful in this high pressure, high competitive environment. It's an interesting conundrum.
Wow, so beautiful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, can you also throw light on what was Paramhansa Yogananda's vision? What exactly was the vision, and how that has come true with the Living Wisdom School in particular, you know? Yeah.
Of course, of course. So Yogananda ji taught, he had a couple of, you know, many people know this, but if you've read his autobiography, the very first thing that he did as an outward service to humanity was to found a school that later was in Ranchi, India. And he felt that the role of education was supremely important in terms of raising global consciousness. I mean, any great teacher, their main task of any religion or any tradition is to raise the consciousness of the age, of the people following them. And so he understood and really felt that by educating children in the right way, by basically creating what we would now call a holistic approach, he talked about the balanced person. Now, what is a balanced person? And he gave illustrations even of, you know, picture somebody whose head is, you know, 4 times bigger than a normal head, or whose legs are much bigger, but his head is very small, as a way of sort of illustrating what happens when we put all of our eggs in the basket of intellectual education or physical education or only diet or whatever it is. And he was like, no, we have to be looking at the whole piece. And so he created a school in Ranchi. He called it a how to live school, which I think is just a beautiful phrase. It's like, what is the purpose of education? Is it to become an engineer? No, that's a part of it. That's almost a side effect of it. But if we're thinking about what do we want for our children, we're thinking about things like, we want them to be successful. We want them to be happy. We want them to live lives that they feel are meaningful. And at the end of the day, that's what we try to do, is because our academic approaches are a piece of our lives. Think about I always think about like a pie chart. If you try to take a big pie chart and decide how much of my life, or even my day, how much of my day today did I use specifically the academic school skills that I learned in school?
Right.
For most people,
Absolutely.
it's a very small piece, no? It's like
Very
this little
small piece. Very
There is-
small.
The rest of it is filled with friendship, human relationships, partnerships
Yes.
with your wife or husband,
Yes.
moving through the world, knowing how to build things, to make new ideas, to put ideas into manifestation. And so all of these things are what Yoganandaji was really trying to bring into education. And his school was extremely successful. He went from having just a handful of students to thousands of students in just a couple of years. Which,
Wow.
I mean, because of course his ideas were rooted in truth. And so these are things that we all intuitively know, but are not always, we don't always get to live these ideals, we sort of say, yeah, it would be good, but I still need to do well on the boards. I still need to do this. And it's that trade-off. We think that we have to pick one or over the other. And education for life, in my experience, and I've now been in a school for many years as a student. I've now taught in school for years as a teacher, and also traveled around and seen and known many of the alumni of these schools. And I know that you don't have to choose. There's no choice. That when you concentrate on higher consciousness in education, you actually get the best of both worlds. You get children who are happy, healthy, whole, and you get people who are academically successful, because as they said it beautifully in the video, when you are safe, when you feel love, when you feel like you're part of a team, you naturally learn. If you actually turn into a sponge and you just start absorbing information automatically.
Yes. Yes. In fact, I had this question, I wanted to ask, so what exactly does it mean when, in the video, one of the teachers says that when the child knows that there is kindness all around, the mind actually opens up. It does not remain shut, and they become more creative, expressive. So why don't you, share some experiences of yours as a student, this kindness, how it affected you and how you were creative. And I have read your interviews where you say that, you were so social, you would easily mingle with anyone, no matter what. So why don't you share those experiences with us?
Sure. It's the principle behind it is that, and this gets into more of Yogananda's explanation of why this works, but we come into this world, and whether you believe in reincarnation or not, there's a sense that if you really think about it, life is a school. We're here to learn whatever lessons, and your lessons may be different than my lessons, and certainly different than their lessons. And we have all of these we're on a bit of a track, and we're going somewhere. We're going towards our higher self, the highest expression of ourself that we can imagine. But how do we get there? And the truth is that inside of each of us is this potential. It's already there.
Yes.
The light is within us.
Yes.
And really what life is about is uncovering, taking away the things that are on top of that. All the self-doubts that sneak in, the negative self-definitions that kind of wedge their way in there and start suppressing that light. So the whole thing is not about we're adding light, we're giving them light. It's we're removing the things that aren't light to allow them to truly shine. And so for me, that manifested in a number of ways, but the social aspect was a major part of that. By the time I was in class 8 in that school, first of all, I had been the oldest child because the school kept growing with me. So I had a very special case. So I'd been the oldest child for many years. But as a result, I had grown very comfortable, not only in helping others. I was often put into roles of leadership, not just myself, but others in my age group with the younger children to sort of gain that experience. But also there was just a sense that when you're a part of a family, when you see your family as not just, as Yogananda actually would say, us four and no more, as like an exclusive, closed off group, but you see your family as everybody who's around you, whether they are a teacher, whether they are a kindergartner and you're in 8th grade, boundaries disappear. And so then when I finally show up to my next level of education, I went to a private high school that had
Mhm.
1,500 students. So just a huge, I was at a school of, Living Wisdom School was a school of 70. We keep it small to be able to maintain that familial interaction. But going to a school that big, I imagine many people coming from a small school would have felt maybe overwhelmed, maybe a little bit scared. And I just found myself, and this is not to say this is anything particularly special for me, but I just immediately saw all of these people as my potential friends that I had just not
Right.
yet met yet.
Right.
And so then
Yeah.
I just made it my mission to get to know everybody. And by the end, I feel like I mostly did. I became vice president of the whole school by the end. Because I loved people. I loved meeting new people. I loved how different everybody was. And
Yes.
I noticed that wasn't true for everybody. And not to
Right.
say that not anybody was. There were a lot of wonderful, kind people at the school, but
Right.
it wasn't part of their training to understand that we're all in this together, that this is all, that every single person you meet is a potential friend. And
Yes.
I feel like that was a major takeaway. I just dove straight in and made wonderful friends and had a wonderful time. And I've seen that theme carry through my life throughout the rest, which is everybody, we're all in this together. There's a idea called the zero-sum game, which is snuck into politics as of, well, actually, it's always been a part of politics, unfortunately. And it's the idea that only one of us can win. If you win, that means that I lost. And that is actually a fallacy. It's simply not true. And there's many examples in the real world to back that up. But that's one of the things we learn in an EFL education is cooperation. We're in this together, and together we can make things that are greater than any one of us on our own.
Wonderful. So beautiful. Also, you talk about basically when you went for the mainstream education, either to high school or to college later on, you found that there was a lot of restriction on the teachers on how creative they could be. So would you like to bring that aspect on as to, what kind of, in what ways that creativity lagged and which later you understood that they could have been more creative?
Sure. Well, that's a very good question. I mean, the challenge is, and especially now that I am starting to get involved in sharing education for life with teachers in CBSE schools in more mainstream settings, you realize from that perspective that it can be very constraining sometimes. That teachers are naturally creative people, and a lot of usually you go into teaching because you have something you really want to share with children. But then there's the gap, which is, okay, you're a teacher now. Here is this exact curriculum that you have to follow to the letter, and you're not allowed to really have a lot of creativity with it often. That probably varies school to school. In my schools outside of education for life schools, some had allowed some creativity. I have to give credit to my high school. They did have a little bit more personality. But by the time I got to college, I was just I was disappointed. I didn't realize this. I wasn't like, oh, I'm very disappointed in all of this. But I was just, why don't I like this? Why isn't this engaging to me? Why don't I find this particularly interesting? And there were a few exceptions, but those exceptions kind of proved the rule, which was overall, the mainstream education, the challenge with it is we try to create a box that fits everybody. But in doing that, we only target sort of the average middle. And that is not an inspiring place to be, because what you are trained to do is you sort of have to take this whole group and move them to the next step. And so whatever high ideals you had about what you'd like to share with the children immediately has to be truncated, cut off at the knees to be able to appeal to this, this larger group. But the problem is that that's not how it actually works. By maintaining high ideals, by having high energy, by always putting an ideal in front of the students that is higher and lighter and better, you actually magnetize the group to aspire to that. And so it was always a little hard to see teachers in college who I know when they got into teaching, they must have believed in it more. But by the time they were there and they had, 70, 80 students in a class, and this was the 50th time they've taught this exact same class.
Right.
And every once in a while you notice, like, I think they've got this memorized. I think this is just like the script for this biology class is already in the brain, and now I just have to
Yes.
say it. And
Yes.
that's challenging for a student to love that. There are some students that do well in that, and that's also the challenge, because we say, okay, no, the system of education is working because look at how well this group of students is doing. They're doing really well on tests. They're learning a lot, but that is a group of students that has learned to adapt, but not necessarily in the highest and most expansive way for them either. They've just figured out how to, as one student I heard from a public education say, they learned how to play the game. And if you learn how to get good grades, a lot of children don't even find that difficult. You know, they're like, okay, if that's all you want me to do is get an A, I can do that. That's not a problem. I just do this, this, and this, and sure, I'll get an A. But they're not being challenged. They're not like being dynamically brought in. And so that's the give and take. It's like, it takes on one hand more energy to give an education for life experience, but the flip side of that is you gain so much, you receive so much energy from the process, from the light that the children or young adults, or in college's case, give back to you. And so then it becomes a dynamic rather than just sort of a one-way flow of information. It becomes really both giving, both receiving.
Wow, so beautiful. And again, you know, coming back to the same interview that I'm talking to you about, I think you do mention that quite a lot of your friends, they got into like amazing jobs with extraordinary salaries and everything, which according to the world standards is like highly successful. But there was something missing in their life, and they would come back to you and tell you that you are leading a dream life. So, I mean, would you like to kind of let us know what was missing? They were not from LWS. I'm assuming they were not from the LWS, and you met them later on in your high school or your college. So what was that thing which was missing in their life? And how, if we are a product of the same environment, if we have been brought up, how can we change that later on?
Right. That's a beautiful question. Well, the first thing is it's never too late. Yogananda had a disciple who came to him when she was already in her late 80s, early 90s. And she basically just gave it her full focus and attention, and she progressed amazingly. So that's one thing. A lot of people come in and they say, oh my God, this school, I wish I could have gone through something like this. And then there's sort of like they don't always say it outwardly, but like, it's too late for me, something like that. And so that part I have to just throw out right out of the gate. You know, age is truly just a number. Now, what can happen over the years is we get into habits, and those habits become stronger. And so sometimes those habits are a little harder to root out, which is why offering positive qualities in education at a young age can be so helpful, because it creates good habits from the beginning, and then those carry you on. But I would have to say that the main difference between my friends, who are very fine people, I mean, they were my friends, and what I received was the idea that life can have a higher meaning, that there's a deeper purpose to this. And I don't mean anything specific with the idea of God, or in my case of self-realization. Education for Life was founded by Yogananda, but he was never trying to train everybody to follow his path of Kriya Yoga. He was trying to offer something that allowed people to have direct experience of higher values. Now, this idea, you see it in education, like, okay, we have English class, and then we have math class, and then we have moral science class. And here's where we learn the science of morality. And not to say that that's bad, but what can happen is it becomes just another academic pursuit. And if you remember that, you know, I'm supposed to be a good friend, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that, I'm supposed to be kind to people, and that will make me a good member of society, that can only last so long. The first challenge that comes to that, something that you've only learned intellectually but isn't rooted in your own experience, is just gonna fly right away. It's just the nature of it. It's not deeply held. And so what we try to do, what we do, is offer experiences of deeper meaning. We offer, and it's integrated into everything we do. And when we're talking about literature, when we're talking about historical people, when we talk about the sciences, we say, look, these morals, this idea that living a high-minded life, a life that prioritizes the search for inner satisfaction, inner joy, really, is valid, it's real, but you can't take our word for it. You have to experience it yourself. And so we offer those experiences. I mean, just talking about sort of that cooperative element and that friendship and heart element that you see so well conveyed in this video of the school. You see the children, you just see them hugging each other and laughing together and and it's across all the classes and all together. Now, we lose somewhere along the way the idea that the purpose of life is to find joy. And that may seem even like not an entirely true thing. But if you boil down all of the things we've been told about what will bring us happiness, you know, the right car, the right job, the right house, the right partner, we've been told, whether literally or subconsciously through media and everything else, that these things will make us happy. But the thing is, it's the reverse. The happiness is already inside. We just have to find it. And then all of those things, the car, the house, the partner, everything else, can manifest that joy, but they're not required to feel that joy. And so what happened with my friends, they went through life and consciously or subconsciously, they thought, okay, if I get the good job, if I go and work for, I had a friend who worked for a major motion picture studio, then he switched to Lucasfilm, working on Star Wars, then he switched to Apple, you know, he's doing extremely well. But through that, I've seen sort of an understanding and maybe, you know, I don't know, I don't want to put words in his mouth. He hasn't said this to me directly, but I can feel that he has sort of felt that he thought that would bring him more joy than it did. Like they're very fun jobs. They're very great jobs. He loved doing it, but I think there was a sense that the joy would come from that rather than the joy that he brought. And I've seen him shift his sort of direction way over towards simplicity from complexity. And I feel like that in itself is sort of like the biggest thing. We're just trying to move away from the idea that what's outside brings us our satisfaction, but rather it is within. And it's a simple switch. Once you see it, it actually changes everything. You don't have to leave your job. You don't have to stop trying to work your way up the corporate ladder. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. It's just, are you doing it with joy, or do you think it's going to bring you joy? Because that second one is going to lead you directly to a midlife crisis. That's where they come from.
Right, absolutely. That was like a quite insightful, you know, answer that you just gave. And I'm sure a lot of people would relate to this because most of us are in that same kind of a midlife crisis and struggling to understand what would bring us that joy that we have been searching for. So that would be an eye-opener.
And that's the thing, is it's nobody's fault. It's just happened. It's just what our society has become built on. And we're working our way through it. You see things like mindfulness, like, you know, higher meaning working its way into society. But for some reason, education in some ways is being left behind. I see much more of this conversation happening at corporates than I do in schools. And I mean, that's good. I want to see it in corporates, but I feel like that's kind of flipped. It should start in schools and then work its way outward because children need it the most. You see a young child and they already know that their happiness is coming from within. They just live in their own world and they just make whole, beautiful, elaborate, you know, imaginations, but it all is around joy. It's all coming from inside. And then slowly, we kind of lose the plot.
Yes. So, I mean, is there any curriculum, Aryavan, that you guys follow in this EFL and LWS? I mean, since I know that for CBSE or ICSE or, you know, any other board, they do have a particular curriculum. They need to finish it in these days and all those kind of things. And they have the assessment as well. So what kind of a system of education is this, if you can just let us know? Is there a
Sure.
curriculum? Are there assessments?
Sure. So because Education for Life's main job, let's say, EFL teacher's main job is to take their group of students and help them to expand, help them to grow. So their job becomes very individual in that sense, their role, because it's with this specific group. And what this group needs might be very different than another group. You know, this group might really need to learn how to cooperate, or how even to just, you know, handle their physical reality, how to order their desk and organize things and not have just everything a big ball of chaos. But another
Right.
group might have that totally nailed. And so if your curriculum is based around, okay, we have to learn order, if this, you know, group of children already knows that, that's not maybe the most effective thing. And then in a normal system, they may have to just go through it anyway, even though the kids already know it. And that's, in EFL, you always want to be, in a sense, challenging our students. One of the things people misunderstand about EFL is they think, oh, you just play all day and you just have fun, and so you're not really doing the work. But actually, we challenge students way more in a certain sense. We challenge them to be growing every single day, and not in a way that forces that, but we put in front of them the invitation. I invite you to grow today. And then we give them the situation where they can have that experience, and then we let them step into it. And if they don't step into it today, that's fine, because there's always tomorrow and there's always the next day, and we can try different approaches. So this
Right.
is sort of, this is, in a sense, this is the beginning of the answer to the question, does EFL have a curriculum? Which is, Education for Life has an approach to curriculum. You know, when I think about it, I can't think of any subject that can't be taught in an EFL way. But EFL doesn't have necessarily specific things that we say, okay, they have to learn this in science, they have to learn this in math, they have to learn this way, because it's so individual. So what we do is we give our teachers an approach to curriculum that they follow. And what it is, Swami Kriyananda in his book, Education for Life, talks about this. He redefines curriculum according to different categories. And so instead of like English class, we think, okay, what are we really trying to learn here? What is the deeper skill that we can learn through literature and writing and maybe giving presentations? Okay, self-expression and communication is what he called it. So the higher aspect of that is not, did I read this poem by Lord Byron? Did I read this book, Huckleberry Finn? Did I read whatever it is? It's, what did I learn about how to express myself? How to learn about what's going on inside? How to write from an authentic place of like what my actual experience is? How did they do it? How can I learn how to do it myself? Not just copying them, but saying, okay, that's a beautiful thing. Now, what is my style? What is coming from within that needs to be communicated? How can I communicate effectively? You know, a good writer is an expert communicator. They're communicating ideas, and often they're very subtle. And they have to find a way to help you to experience that idea. And so that's sort of how we approach that. Then there's, you know, the idea of cooperation. This takes many forms. You know, things like foreign language can be involved in that, because we're learning about other cultures and how we can cooperate with them. There's understanding people, which is the core of many classes like history. It's like, why do we learn history? Why learn what date Gandhiji did this or that, when it's much more important to understand why he did it? And what is, and now how does that apply to your life? How does that apply to the fights you had with your friend the other day? What would Gandhiji have done in that situation? So we're taking we're sort of trying to look at every single aspect of education and not say, oh, we need to throw that out, but say, how can we take this and pick up the highest thread from within it? How can we say, you know, this, with the Battle of Hastings, okay, well, what does that mean in my day-to-day life? Well, exactly nothing. Not a thing, right? It's like, like maybe you go on a trivia show someday and you're able to win a prize because you knew this one obscure fact. But pretty much other than that, Nothing. But if you learn
Nothing.
about the different sides, what was motivating them, what caused them to make those decisions, what pushes you to want to start a battle, to start a war?
Yes.
When is it
Yes.
right? When is it, you can even bring in the idea of dharma. When is that the right thing to do? Because
Yes.
no action is inherently good or bad. It all has to do with context and motivation and subtlety.
Absolutely.
And so this
Absolutely.
is why we find our students do well, because as soon as they get into a situation where they have to actually apply knowledge, they are prepared. Because when you go to work for Google, they're not going to say, did you pass this test? What score did you get here, here, and here? They say, here's a problem we're having. How can we solve it?
Yes.
And if
right.
you're prepared with all of that, those tools of sort of like, this is how people work, this is how things work, this is, if this happens, then that, all of a sudden
Yes.
you're like, I can do this. I can solve this.
Yes. Right. So till what grade, I mean, do you have high school in LWS, and do you also have any colleges or anything, or are you planning to come up with one?
Sure. So yeah, most of our schools have been primary, KG or preschool or nursery through class 8. But I actually taught at the Living Wisdom High School here in the Ananda Living Wisdom School in Nevada City, California. I'm actually in the building I used to teach at right now. And the principles apply on all levels. That's one of the things is we also see people say, okay, that's okay when you're in first and second grade, but when you get into high school, you have to get into the real thing. And in our high school, our students overwhelmingly tested in the top percentiles in national standardized tests. But we never taught to the test. We never even looked at the test beforehand. We concentrated on what we needed to learn. And of course, there are certain guidelines. When you get to that level, you have to say, yeah, we have to learn US history in America. We have to learn, you have to take 2 years of language. You have to do this, this, and this. But everything in the approach is, how can we make this more dynamic? How can we make this more relevant to the student's experience? And then give them an experience of that. So it works absolutely wonderfully at the high school level. We also have had universities. At the moment, I think we have a gap year program that we offer that's aligned with EFL, and it just sort of goes back and forth. We're always trying to adapt to the demand at the time, and so right now, a lot of our energy is also going into supporting families, supporting parents, because geography being what it is, we can't all attend an EFL school, even though I should say there is an online EFL high school right now that is doing very well and is really very dynamic, actually. And they have students from India, Iran, Italy, US, all over the planet. And so this is actually a very exciting model, but generally not everyone's able to achieve that for their children. And so we've been putting also a lot of energy lately. There's a new initiative called Conscious Families, run by a friend of mine, Aaron Vinaco, and just trying to offer these same ideas. How do you offer values to your children? How do you work with their energy? How do you give them a more uplifted idea of what it is to grow? And giving very practical approaches and tips to be able to do that, I think is a big part of how EFL can really grow and spread and also serve more people. Because that's, at the end of the day, that's the great thing about all of this, is our only goal here is to help. Education for life is, we feel, really that Yogananda is asking us, how can we look at how many people are suffering in the world because they don't have access to higher values, they don't have access to meaning in life, and how can we help offer that in a way that is universal and magnetic and practical?
Yes. So when the children say, suppose they read only till the middle school here, and then they migrate to mainstream education. So Aryavan, how is it that since it's curriculum based education in all the other places, even the bigger universities, when you go to tomorrow, you go to Harvard, isn't it like all of a sudden there's a shock value attached to whatever you are doing? You're like, oh my god, it's now rote learning that I need to do. And how do you align yourself to that kind of a thing? And secondly, I also want to ask you, since it's not any particular affiliation to any such university, isn't it difficult for students to get admissions in the good universities all across? These are the two things.
Sure, sure. No, those are great questions. Well, the second one first is we are, the schools here in the United States, well, we have a different system than in India, but our schools are accredited through the group called WASC, which is the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. And so our high school diplomas are worth the same as any other high school. They qualify you for higher education. Our students go on to very fine universities, University of California, Berkeley, Chapman University, Reed University in Oregon. So there's not a challenge, because here's the irony of the whole thing. Even Harvard, even all of these different higher schools of education are realizing that the academic only approach isn't working. That when they only accept children who have a 4.6 GPA, I don't know if you use that system there, but that means essentially they had all A's and also in advanced placement courses, advanced courses. But when they only accept those children, they get a very narrow group of children in terms of their diversity, in terms of their character. And in college is where you really start to see where that character comes out. I actually want to give an example from one step beyond the university, which is, I mentioned earlier, Google. They did a program recently. They're I think the top 5 largest companies in the world, certainly one of the all-time most famous companies. Everyone is using Google every day.
Yes.
So they wanted to do sort of create an algorithm for training. They're big into algorithms. So they're always trying to find the most efficient and technical way to hire and to do everything they do. So they looked at their existing workforce, and they gave everyone ratings, and they tried to figure out who was their best employees, and then try to see what correlation there was to what school they had gone to what grades they got, all of the above. And there was something very interesting. They found in their best employees that there was not a single data item that pointed towards going to Harvard made them more likely or less likely to be a good employee. That getting, magna cum laude, where they're graduating with honors at this very prestigious school, helped them to be a better employee. And they created a list, actually, of the most important qualities of a Google employee. And in the top 7, there is not one academic skill.
Wow.
Every single skill is working with people, how to be a leader, how to be, literally social and emotional, empathy. All of the things that we put emphasis on, Google is saying are the very most important skills, the very best keys to knowing who's going to be a good employee here. And so as that happens, then schools start to realize, oh man, we have to start prioritizing character. We have to start bringing in students, because our ship is going to go down if we're only getting these super intellectually advanced students, but we're not getting students who also have a balanced approach to life. And so when you look at college applications now, you'll see a lot more emphasis on extracurricular activities, on your writing, on the way you express yourself and communicate, and less and less on the standardized test, which is the SAT for us, or the ACT, and your grades. In fact, some schools are already starting to stop looking at that. And so it's a combination of things. Our students, like I said, they do very well in standardized tests. So when the time comes to take a test that places you in a school, we're in the 95th percentile for many years in this school of people who take this test across the country. So what we're doing, that's what I was saying before, it's not even a trade-off. It's by helping the child to grow, we're actually preparing them, as it says on the cover of the book Education for Life, for the challenges of life. It's an incredibly practical approach, because the challenges of life are multifaceted. They're never just one little narrow topic. And so by giving them this broad base of educational experience, we're actually preparing them to succeed in the quote unquote real world. That's what people always used to say to us, not so much anymore, but in the early days they'd say, is my child going to be ready for the real world? And it's like, they're going to be more ready than the other kids for the real world. because they understand what's going on in the inner world. And that prepares you better than any outward education can.
True, true. Thank you so much. And so now coming to as an educator, what are the challenges, if at all? Because I know you have started in India, and I'm very happy as a mother, the way my daughter is developing, the confidence level I see in her within a week. I'm saying, I'm not even talking like months. The kind of happiness she has, the joy that she gets out of, attending the school with all the such kind teachers and who are very creative, mingling with all the other children without feeling the pressure of, saying, I am better. That pressure is not there, where everyone accepts each other with everything they bring. So what, as an educator, what are the challenges that you are facing currently, especially in India right now?
Sure. So one of the biggest challenges, and this is another aphorism of Yoganandaji's, environment is stronger than willpower. And basically that the place that we find ourselves in, the people that we talk to, and also even just the energy in the air, what's in our popular media, can overpower even our highest ideals. If you want to be a great artist, if you live with a bunch of accountants, it's going to be more challenging to become a great artist. The whole reason we go to school, actually, in higher education, we go to art school so we can learn art. We want to surround ourselves with artists, and that environment is more conducive to creating that nurturing that aspect of yourself that will be an artist. The same is true in the negative sense, which is India right now, and this is the whole world, but I think India has now a special challenge with it, which is that there is a strong, deep-seated belief that if we do not focus completely on academics, that our child will not succeed. And that it is our role, of course, as parents, to be able to give them that opportunity for success. Every parent wants their child to live as good or better of a life than they were able to lead. It's one of the most beautiful aspects of parenthood, is this selfless desire to give to your child everything that they deserve, everything which for a parent is everything. You want them to have the very best.
Yes.
But the challenge is that the definition of that has become very deeply academic success, passing and doing well on the board exams, being very first in your class. And the competition is real. It's a very real thing. There was a friend whose child was first in their class. I mean, first out of must have been 1,000 children. And they were not able to get into the school they wanted to go to. They had to go to their second choice. And that's an incredible thing. So the competition and the numbers, the scale is real. But the challenge is the reason it's become so competitive is we have narrowed our definition for success so narrow, and we're trying to force so many children through this very narrow funnel that it becomes clogged. And that's what's happening now. But what I'm seeing, so the challenge for Education for Life in India, this would be a major challenge, is helping people to feel and understand that they're actually making a very positive, expansive, and practical choice for their child by putting them into an EFL school or any school that prioritizes a more expansive understanding of what it is to learn. And that's going to take time. That's I think about turning like a large ship, a really big steamliner or a cruise ship in water in the ocean. You start the turn and it takes a long, long time to make that turn full. But it is happening. I see it every day. And I think especially with COVID, I think having parents getting to see, the limitations of education, especially those of them who had children who were able to be on Zoom, to be online at home, which was great that they were able to continue their education. But I think we're going to have a bit of a wake-up call, which is there's been this kind of vicious cycle where parents felt pressure from society So they put the pressure on the teachers feel the pressure from the parents, and so they put that pressure on the kids feel the pressure from the teachers and maybe even the parents, and so that pressure gets built back into society. And then it just keeps cycling on. And what COVID did, what I pray COVID did, and what I'm starting to see in people's experience is it created a reset. We get to just sort of break that cycle for a second and say, I'm now seeing the result of this. My child is stressed out. They don't want to go to school. They don't want to do their schoolwork. And we've become accustomed to the idea that that's a natural way to feel, that children aren't supposed to just love going to school. But that is not true. We are meant to love to learn. We come into this world with a deep love of learning. And it's the reverse. It's the overemphasis on structure, the overemphasis on you have to pass this test that has pushed the joy out. And that's why one of our sayings in Education for Life is where joy and learning come together. You don't have to choose that in fact, they are both accentuated when they are both prioritized. And that's the thing that I think we're going to see now coming out is this idea that we don't have to choose. I want my child to be happy. I want my child to be joyful. And the first ones who do it, yourself included, you're taking a bit, you're leaping before you look a little bit. You're taking a chance, but because you are prioritizing the joy of your child, you're seeing this shift 1 week in school, and you already see a change. We have students who come to our school in Palo Alto who are actually in any of our schools, but Palo Alto is very high pressure. The schools are very intense. And a lot of times children come and they're hurt. They're hurting actually, because that system for someone who is sensitive and can really feel, the energy around them, that can be it can even be a traumatic experience. And time after time, I hear parents talk about after 1 week, they're completely transformed. They don't even recognize their child. They're not afraid of school anymore. They love school. They're laughing. And best of all, they're learning, because that's what happens. So we don't have to choose. We do have to choose. We have to make actually a very powerful choice. We have to choose joy. We can't afford not to choose joy. Society depends on our choosing joy, because if we don't, we're going to end up in a very, very sad place where people are walking around and they don't realize why they're sad. And it's because they've shut down. And it's not education's fault, but education can be an agent for change.
Right, absolutely. So I have actually shared all the website links for EFL in the description, and particularly for all the parents who are in India, if they want to contact, I think, Niyati is there on the, show. She can share her number. Who should they get in touch with for, getting their child enrolled?
Absolutely. So Niyati is a great contact point. She's one of our wonderful teachers at the EFL school in Pune right now. You can also contact me. I'm happy for my number to be there on WhatsApp if you have any questions, especially if you're in a different part of the country and you want to know what you can do. We do offer classes for parents, online regularly. And so you can contact myself. I also saw Prisha on the chat. And she's also a great resource. She's been working with EFL in India for, I think, more than a decade now. And so she's really a really great resource for that. And she's also involved in the school in Pune, but in addition in the training process. So, and just offering these skills. And we're actually in the process of founding, trying to create more of an online community where parents and teachers in India can sort of, and across the world, can sort of share with each other what's working, what's not, what limitations, how can I work with this energy, my child's doing this, what can I do? I want to help them, but what I'm doing isn't working. And that's where we really like to offer different approaches and tools to help parents and teachers offer the ideals that they feel also to their child, because they know that these ideals work for them, but how do I offer this to my child? Sometimes it's not enough to just share it with them. We have to find more creative ways. So please, feel free to share my number or in the space, and or my email. I'd be very happy to talk with anybody.
Sure. So we will just quickly move on to the next round, which is I always say it's a more light-hearted round. It's the lightning bolt round, and let's do that.
Great.
So, Aryavan, what is the one man-made thing that you cannot do without, that you cannot survive without?
Mercy. I didn't. Oh man. I'd have to say, ooh. I mean, if we're being honest, it would probably be, well, my Kindle, because I have 100 books on one. But I'd also have to say, realistically, my mobile, because it allows me to be in communication with so many wonderful people around the world, and so many great things can happen through it. Sometimes also not great things because I end up reading the news too much, but mostly it's a positive influence.
Okay, great, great. If you could speak to any animal on this earth, which animal would you choose to, and which language would you speak in?
Wow. Maybe a hawk, like a bird of prey, one of the birds that can fly really, really high.
Yes.
I'd like to know about what it's like to have that kind of perspective, to be able to see so much at once, and to have that kind of expansive feeling. And I'd like to be able to speak in their language, if possible. And I don't know what a hawk language is, but that would be. I'd like to be able to meet them where they're at.
Wow, beautiful. So, who has been the biggest influence in your life?
I have to say Swami Kriyananda, who is my teacher and friend, and also wrote the book literally on education for life, but also just in terms of the unconditional friendship that he gave everyone. I got to spend a few years very close to him, and I've never met somebody who was so joyful, so kind, and so giving. And I have to believe, and I found from my own experience, that is because he was so giving that he was so joyful. So I try to take that example in my life too.
Wow, thank you so much. So if the Harvard gave you an invite to go change whatever you don't feel holistic and wholesome there, then would you first of all take it up, and what's the first thing that you would change or transform?
Oh, I would absolutely take it up. I'm happy to speak with anybody who's interested, no matter where they are. And then the first thing, Harvard's actually doing some interesting things right now. They have a whole happiness course, which sounds heavy, but I've actually read up on it, and it's quite brilliant. But what I would say is, I would throw out, the first thing I'd want to offer is the idea that, how do you define success? I'd like a course on success, and I'd like that to be the very introduction to, you have to take this course before every other course.
Yes.
Let's get to the root of this. What is success? What is success for you, and why? Because it's the lack, I think it's the lack of critical thinking that leads us to sort of fall into this trap. And if we can catch that at that time, I mean, college students are very idealistic. They have a real opportunity to hear new ideas and to shift an entire lifetime. And yeah, what is it that's really what's your successful life look like in 5-10 years, and why? And is it really going to make you happy?
Thank you. Are you competitive?
I am. Only when somebody else is competitive. I've noticed this in myself. I'm very cooperative. Playing soccer, even I used to play racing games on the Nintendo. I was just having a good time, and everyone is, we're all doing this. But as soon as somebody got really competitive, I was like, well, I have to show them. And so then it really came out. But that was I always try to have it in a fun way. I never would rub it in their face. I would just quietly beat them when they're like, oh, I'm leaving you in the dust. That was a big mistake on their part.
Yeah. Right, I like that. The most memorable moment of your life?
Ooh. I mean, okay, so the day that the day I became a disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda, not because it was sort of a decision that I made and I felt like I needed to do this, but because the feeling that I got when I did it so confirmed the idea that this was not my choice, that this was something that already existed and I was merely affirming it. And every basically every blessing, every positive aspect of my life. The reason my life right now is so fun and dynamic and alive is entirely, I can trace back to that decision.
Beautiful. What's your most favorite food item?
Ooh. Most favorite's a tough one, but I really like pani puri. I'll sit there on the side of the road and eat like 18 of those in a sitting, which is not necessarily a good thing for me, but I love it.
So India has rubbed off quite well with you.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, it's pav bhaji. The Indian street food for me is the pinnacle. Everything else is
Wow.
trying.
Great. Aryavan, it's your birthday today, and Aranya Sita has just let us know that. So happy birthday to you! Many happy returns of the day, and may God bless you, and you really succeed in bringing EFL to every nook and corner of the world. Changing all the children's lives. That is our wish for you.
Beautiful. That's my wish for the world. If I'm able to give anything or be a part of giving anything, I'm very grateful. But thank you for the birthday wishes. I didn't anticipate that making its way into the conversation. So thank you, and it was a joy to speak with you and a joy to be here. I'm always so inspired by how much light is being poured into the world, but it takes people who experience that light and have a clear vision of it to be able to share it. And so shows like this are really a beautiful thing.
I have just 2-3 more for you before we take a leave.
Sure.
So which one is better, life as a bachelor or as a partner to another soul?
Oh, well, if my wife's watching, a partner to another soul. But if she's not, no, it's everyone's path is unique. I've met people who absolutely their life was enriched by being single, by being a bachelor, and enriched by being a partner. And I think, with the sense of reincarnation, it's like we all have done all. We've all been everything to everyone. And so there's just different lessons that you can learn in being a bachelor and being married. But for myself, I have to say, having a partner has been spiritually, emotionally, personally enriching on a level that I actually could not have imagined 6 years ago when we were married.
Beautiful. What is your go-to song when you're feeling down?
Oh my goodness. Wow. Swami Kriyananda has an album, Music to Awaken Superconsciousness. And it's all instrumental except for a couple. He does chant Om for a little bit, but it's just this very mystical, magical music. It's almost the music I would imagine is playing in some kind of other realm, some higher plane. And whenever I listen to it, if I listen to even just a few songs or certainly the whole album, by the end, I can't feel how I felt before. It kind of just goes away. It's cheating, actually. It fixes my consciousness without my having to really do a lot. It just...
Wow. I need to listen to it.
Highly recommend.
I better do that. Yes. And lastly, your most favorite book till date?
Okay. I'm going to put aside Education for Life because that's a given. And I want to be able to bring in something else to the conversation. That's actually a very good point. I really like fiction, actually. So I would have to say, just to break the norm, Autobiography of a Yogi, but also, there's my number on WhatsApp, but also Lord of the Rings. I found reading all 3 books together, it brought me into a world. And whenever I'm really brought deeply into another world, it helps me keep perspective on the fact that this one, I don't have to take it so seriously. The life is made for joy, and that the intricacies and the politics and this person's president, this person's prime minister, it matters to a certain degree, but in this other world, it's a whole other reality. And when I was reading it, that felt just as real as this one. And so I get to sort of pump the brakes on getting too invested on the ups and downs that play out around me.
Beautiful. So we have made a note of all the inspirational things that you have shared with us. And thank you so much for all your time. And for the audience, this is the number. This is the WhatsApp number for Aryavan and the India contact number as well. So please feel free. If you want to find out more, you can get in touch with them and you can find out. I can assure you, I'm a mother whose daughter goes to the same school, and I can already see her life changing. So I'm a very happy mother having a joyful daughter. So highly, highly recommended.
Wonderful. It was a joy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Aryavan. You have a good rest of the day, and thank you so much. It was an honor having you here.
It was a joy. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and God bless.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Great audience. I had a lot of fun and I was completely inspired, and I hope the same has happened with you. So if you are a parent and if you have been looking for something which is much more holistic than what the mainstream education brings, you can always get in touch. You can find out and you can think of this alternative form of education where the children's happiness and kindness and spreading joy and collaboration is given more importance than just the technical education. So with that, I bid you adieu, and I wish you a great night ahead and a great week ahead. God bless you. Take care. Bye-bye. Next week again, I'll be there with another phenomenal guest. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.